This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, along to my usual sidekick and partner in crime, that is the Doc, from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how's it going?
Vito, always enjoy the conversation. My goodness, man. In talking about Tigers baseball, everyone's kind of now looking at the fact that, oh, man, when you look at who was cut, who was waived, this Tiger team in 2018 is going to look completely different. I mean, how devastated were you that Andrew Romine was waived and he was picked up by the Seattle Mariners? The Andrew Romine era is now over, and I'm kind of bumming.
Finally over. What I say, so I'm not too
Exactly
surprised
right.
or really saddened by it. I'll tell you that much.
Who got waived? A lot of people seem like got let go by the Detroit Tigers. I know one in particular, I believe, was it Kyle Ryan? A pitcher that every time he got thrown out there in situations couldn't do the job. So, okay, good. And for me, when I look at what Avila's job is going to be, he has to retool this, but it's starting to look like they're stripping this down to the bare bones. And it's unfortunate, but it has to be done.
Trying to do as much to move on from this past era of Tigers baseball and moving on from these guys that really were dead weight on the team, that didn't contribute, really can't contribute for the future. And they're trying to build for the future. So, rightfully so, Brian Holiday, Miles J., first baseman, Efren Navarro. Do you know that name? Do you remember him playing first base a little bit of pop in that bat? You know, nice player at AAA. And lefty Kyle Ryan. Kyle Ryan was outrighted as well. So all of those dudes were outrighted, meaning they won't be a part of next year's ball club more than likely. And rightfully so, those guys really didn't have any long-term future with the Tigers. Brian Holiday, I think his call to fame right now, well, he laid down that squeeze, that suicide squeeze bunt a few years ago that worked out really well. I think it was against the White Sox, and also because he's JV's best friend, or one of his good buddies from the past with the Detroit Tigers. So I wonder if Brian Holiday, Doc Holiday, was at JV's wedding in Italy, Tuscany, Italy, with his wife, the beautiful Kate Upton, as they wed after JV wins a World Series ring for the first time in his career and then spends time getting married in Italy right after that and misses the World Series parade in Houston because of it, Doc.
Later in the podcast, we'll talk about Justin Verlander, his Game 6 performance, and whether or not he probably should have stayed in Houston for the parade. And I also want to get your sense about kind of the city of Detroit supporting JV. There's been a lot of debate locally, nationally, regarding how much love and support should the fans of Detroit have given a guy like Justin Verlander, and I'll get your opinion a little bit later on. But yeah, props to JV getting married. But speaking of the Tigers and looking at their roster next year, I think it's looking like, and it's safe to say, that the roster is going to be pretty bare. It's going to be a roster full of lower paid guys making, league minimum and above, maybe $2 or $3 million at max. Avila is not going to be surveying the landscape and going out and getting high-priced free agents. I think I read somewhere where maybe the top-end guy that they might sign might make no more than $5 to $6 million. So when you look at the makeup of next year's roster, we're looking at 90 to 100 losses right away. I don't see a scenario in which next year's team doesn't lose a whole heck of a lot of baseball games.
The roster is bound to be even more depleted, even more barren going into 2018 and beyond. They've also, by the way, outrighted outfielders Jim Adducci, Tyler Collins, and right-hander Jeff Farrell. Also outrighted outfielder Alex Presley. To the minor leagues. Presley wasn't too bad in that backup fourth outfielder role, gaining more and more starts as the season progressed once JD Martinez was dealt to the Arizona Diamondbacks. And then Upton was dealt right at that waiver trade deadline on August 31 of this year. So those guys being moved allowed Presley to get more at-bats as the season progressed. He wasn't too bad in that fourth outfielder role as he got more and more starts, more and more ABs. Obviously not a high-quality major leaguer, a guy that should start for you every day. But as a fourth outfielder on next year's ball club, when they're bound to lose 90 to 100 games like you said, Doc, already, I wouldn't mind Alex Presley being a part of the ball club. And there is a chance they might bring him back because guess what? he will be under that $5 million threshold to sign for 2018. And I think they're going to keep their ball players that they do sign, if they do sign anybody at all, honestly. Those guys are going to be $5 million or less contracts. Guys, $5 million or less guys that they give out contracts to because they don't want to spend big money. So I think the max would be a $5 million contract given out to somebody this offseason, Doc.
Understood. And a lot of people have messaged us on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. Manager Ron Gardenhire has filled out his staff, and he brought over a lot of guys from the time when he worked with the Minnesota Twins. Your reactions? Do you think that potentially when you see, who he's brought over, anybody impress you? I know that they filled out the staff regarding the manager at Toledo. He's kind of filling out his staff with a bunch of guys that he's familiar with.
Yeah, the AAA skipper now will be Doug Mankiewicz. This guy was a first baseman, a nice player in the past for numerous teams, including the Minnesota Twinkies. So Ron Gardenhire brings him aboard to be the AAA skipper at Toledo. And the Tigers obviously have a role in that. They could say no to Doug Mankiewicz getting that job at AAA Toledo to be the skipper for the Tigers in AAA next season, but gave him the green light. He is a skipper now for next year. We'll see how that does go for Doug Mankiewicz and the Tigers. And also filling out his major league staff, you're right, with a lot of former Twinkies staff members, including a guy that we mentioned last week in Rick Anderson to be his bullpen coach. The pitching coach is a guy from the Cubs who spent the last 5 years, I believe, with the Cubbies of the North Side. And that would be Chris Bosio, a guy that really helped to rectify or resurrect the career of Jake Arrieta on the North Side of Chicago. Arrieta, now a free agent, will be getting a lot of money, be paid handsomely on the open market this offseason. And I like those two hires. Ramon Santiago gets the first base job, so they go from Omar Vizquel, a former major leaguer, to Ramon Santiago, a former major leaguer, former Detroit Tiger, utility infielder, as you know, Doc, and I think the masses do know about Ramon. And then the third base coach, once again, is guess who? Dave Clark. Dave Clark is back. Lloyd McClendon is back. So some notable guys that are back from Brad Ausmus's staff, including McClendon, including Dave Clark, and then hiring a guy, a newbie in Ramon Santiago, kind of a odd hire, and we'll see how he fits at first base. But obviously the expectations for a first base coach aren't that high, and then he'll help out with the infielders too in his role going forward with the Tigers, Doc.
Any concern, because obviously a name that kind of has been known to the Tigers and one that many fans in town kind of gravitated towards. Some people were disappointed that Omar Vizquel was not retained by this new incoming staff. Any concerns at all on your part? Any reaction? Because you look at it, and obviously the Tigers are looking to go in a different direction, and Gardenhire has the right to bring in whoever he wants to work with, but Omar Vizquel not being part of the staff, some people messaged us and were a little bit disappointed that a guy that was maybe an up-and-coming name, a guy that could have been in line to maybe even be the manager of the Detroit Tigers, no longer with the staff. And I think he joked around. Someone asked him, okay, what are you going to do now that you're not with the Tigers? And he said, I'm just going to Disney World.
Well, you know what? It might be the case where Ron Gardenhire didn't want to keep Omar Vizquel on the staff because he knows Vizquel is a candidate to replace Gardenhire. If anything goes wrong with Gardy, they could have just said, hey, let's put Omar Vizquel in this role as the Tiger skipper. So maybe he felt that he was competition and feared him taking his job in Motown. So maybe it was a case of that, and now Vizquel can move on, do what he wants, and he'll garner another role really quick if he does want it as well on a major league coaching staff.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Maybe because of the fact that, in any situation, the guy that's in the background is always the fan favorite. Always the guy that people want to see. And I would have liked to have seen, if the Tigers had decided on maybe moving on from Brad Ausmus a little earlier, what Omar Vizquel would have been able to do. Maybe, he could have been able to get that spark that the Tigers were desperately looking for last season.
Yeah, you know what? Now they're moving in another direction, and it's kind of time to put that away, to hush that, because I don't know if it was ever really going to happen. Honestly, I think it was more of us speculating, Doc, as media members and Tigers pundits and fans, than anything that was really a true rumor that could have come to fruition, Omar Vizquel becoming the Tigers manager.
So, Vito, quick note, and it's kind of funny. You know that talk we had last week regarding Gabe Kapler and the fact that he was hired on by the Philadelphia Phillies? Well, very funny in that, when a new manager comes up there, he meets the media is going to ask him wide-ranging questions regarding his philosophies, past stuff, what he thinks he can bring to the table. A reporter actually asked Gabe Kapler about the blog that we spoke on, and he had to kind of, really, that was his first test, in that he passed it with flying colors, in that he said, look, I kind of wrote it tongue-in-cheek. I wrote stuff back in the day when I was doing a blog, and the intention of a blog is to be entertaining and kind of to be a little bit off the cuff, and so that was the past, and obviously we all have done and said things in our past that we're not exactly comfortable with, but he actually handled it, and somebody asked it, fair or foul. You think somebody, if you were in that press conference and Gabe Kapler was, the new manager of the Tigers, would you have asked that question about, the blog regarding whatever we talk? What was it again? Some lotion or something that you could
his
do?
balls being exposed, and people's balls, major leaguers' ball sacks being exposed to the sun.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was all about it. He is all about that life. Hey, more power to him and the major leaguers and people in general that do that with their ball sacks. But I'm not going to be doing that. And I wouldn't have asked it. I don't think I have the balls for it. I was going to keep using that word, that term. But truly, I don't think I have the sack, the cojones to have asked that question to Gabe Kapler in a press conference when you're supposed to be a little bit professional. And you and I like having fun. And I think in a podcast platform, you can have a little bit more fun and bring up that kind of stuff, right? That's off the wall and half-hearted conversations such as that. Now, I was going to say, too, he brought up how, it was him writing a blog to bring attention to himself into the blog. And you kind of had, that was a way of bringing attention to it, right? By writing about a subject such as that half-heartedly. I was going to say, too, you know what? You try out stuff when you're younger that's stupid, that you don't want revealed to the masses as you grow older, such as some of my radio shows on campus at Detroit Mercy. I wouldn't want those being revealed now. Come on. I mean, I bombed on some of those shows. I know we had you on, remember? You and Adam were on, which I don't know if anybody even knows that. Have we ever revealed that or talked about that on the podcast network?
Yeah, we talked about it.
Maybe once. But you and Adam were on. I think we did. Did I do well that day? I don't even know if you remember.
I thought it was a fun conversation.
I think it went all right. But
do you have access to any of those old clips or any archives of the podcast that you did on some of those shows or interviews? Maybe we'll play some.
I do have a few that were good. I think some that were good. The old ones that were bad are erased. Trust me, I deleted those. But actually, not all of them were archived ever. So even if they were good or bad. But I think the good ones were archived, actually. So I don't think yours was, though. I don't know if you ever got...
I never really got... No,
you got nothing from that, right?
I looked a couple times, a couple weeks after we had the conversation, and I never got a chance to play it back. So anyways, Vito, the other major news that we got to talk about is Twitter lit up on Monday when the version of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame kind of came out. And obviously, a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings regarding Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker, Jack Morris. There's not really a strong, significant showing from the 1984 Tigers team, widely regarded as one of the best collective baseball teams in a long time. I mean, you remember that, obviously everybody remembers that 35-5 start. It was a collective group of talent that really went through that season and capped it off with a World Series victory, and not a lot of representation from that team. But first and foremost, a lot of people, when they discovered that Lou Whitaker was completely left off the ballot this go-around, were really upset and saying, dude, what is it going to take for these guys to actually get the recognition that they deserve? And some reporters and fans of ours that tweeted us at Detroit Podcast said, look, how can Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell, Jack Morris, how can they get the highest accolades possible in Major League Baseball? How can they achieve and earn those accolades when their numbers are not even retired by the Tigers organization? And that's step one. It makes complete sense in that how can Major League Baseball view those guys as the best of the best Hall of Famers when their own team lets others use their number? I am a little bit bothered that Jose Iglesias was able to use Lou Whitaker's old number one number, had been kind of semi-retired by the Tigers, but once he came on to the team, Jose Iglesias had been able to utilize that. But I do believe what everyone's saying. How can you expect that Lou Whitaker, Alan Trammell, Jack Morris can get voted on in these different ways of getting into the Hall of Fame without even honoring them yourselves as an organization?
The number 3 worn by Alan Trammell from 77 to 95 should be retired. Actually, through 96 should be retired. The number 1 jersey worn by Lou Whitaker should be retired. He wore that from 77 to 95. So Trammell had the extra year on him. The longest double play combination in Major League Baseball history. There are weaker double play combinations in Major League Baseball history whose careers have been honored with the plaque in Cooperstown. So think about that. That Tigers double play duo, I believe, amassed a WAR north of 125, even north of 130. It's 131 something. The combination of Trammell and Lou Whitaker. Trammell at short, Whitaker at second for all those years on the corner of Michigan and Trumbull at Tiger Stadium. Yet, neither have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. And it starts off with the jerseys not being retired at Comerica Park? Why aren't there numbers, right, retired at Comerica Park, as they should have been a long time ago? And Iglesias, as you said, is currently wearing the number 1 jersey that was worn by Lou Whitaker, and Kinsler is currently wearing the number 3 jersey that was worn by Alan Trammell. So, yes, their jerseys should have been retired a long time ago, and if any time was more right than now, with these guys now being on this modern baseball era ballot, and Whitaker being left off of that, well, the only way to make amends for that, to halfway make amends for that, would be to retire Lou Whitaker's number, and Trammell's should be retired as well, definitely, at Comerica Park, Doc.
And so what version was Lou Whitaker left off of this go-around?
So it was the modern baseball era ballot. And this was just a way of these guys having a second, third, fourth, fifth, you name it, chance at getting into the Hall of Fame. And a lot of people, a lot of Tigers fans, but just baseball pundits in general, have wanted Trammell to make the Hall of Fame for a long time. And that also includes Jack Morris. The sad thing, but true thing about Lou Whitaker's candidacy for the Hall of Fame is that when he first appeared on the ballot, he didn't garner enough votes to stay on the ballot for a second year. That's a travesty in all of this, and then being left off of this version of the ballot for players that played in the era from 1970 to 1987 specifically. Once again, Trammell and Whitaker and Morris, Jack Morris, that is the great Tigers starting pitcher who won the most games, by the way, in the decade of the 1980s. Those guys are on, could have been on this ballot, and 2 of the 3 are, Whitaker being left off, and many people are criticizing the Hall of Fame for leaving off Whitaker from this modern baseball era ballot. When you look at his numbers throughout the years and the WAR that he garnered, and all those numbers amount to the fact that Whitaker at least should have been on this modern baseball era ballot, Doc.
When we sit back and actually respect what the actual accomplishments were from the 84 team, do you think that maybe the perspective nationally in terms of the writers, obviously locally, a lot of writers, media, fans respect the careers of those guys from the 84 team. But nationally, do you think that collectively maybe writers view the 84 team similar to the 2004 Pistons, where they view it kind of like the sum of the parts collectively were unbelievable altogether, but individually they don't respect the individual talents of a Jack Morris, of a Alan Trammell, of a Lou Whitaker? They say, no, the 84 team collectively as a unit was much greater than the sum of the parts. Do you believe that, or do you think that maybe Trammell, Whitaker, Jack Morris, in some people's eyes, just aren't as sexy as others maybe from New York or other major league clubs? But I'm just surprised. Why don't you think they're represented as well as maybe they would have been if they played in a New York market?
I think the lack of winning consistently. Now, they won in 84, had the great season starting off 30-5-5, being the best team from day one. But in 87 was the only other time where they won a division championship with Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker, and Jack Morris. So they missed out on winning consistently, and I think that hurts the reputation of those 3 names. Now, Morris, remember, won another World Series title, won a couple of them. So Morris was a very successful man in big games in the postseason, too. What hurts Morris in his candidacy, and has for a long, long time, has been the fact that his ERA over his career is nearly 4. That hurts you in your candidacy for major league starting pitchers who are up for the Hall of Fame, as Morris was for a long, long time, but never got enshrined. And he has a chance of getting in from being the highest winning pitcher of the 1980s. He could belong in the Hall of Fame because of just that right there, Doc, and his success in big games. But what hurts Trammell, and a reason why he's not in the Hall of Fame, a reason why Whitaker perhaps is not in the Hall of Fame and not even on this modern baseball era ballot, which is once again just a travesty, a complete travesty. And as Bless You Boys put it, effing inexcusable. Really is that Whitaker's not even on this ballot, Doc. But Trammell never won a Most Valuable Player award in the regular season. Whitaker obviously did not either. Trammell came close. Should have won it when George Bell won it in 1987. That was a travesty in itself, and many people, and I believe myself, even, never watching Trammell play in his prime in 87, obviously I was born in 93, but in 87, if he would have won that American League Most Valuable Player award, I think many people do believe that Trammell would be in the Hall of Fame right now as we speak. And it stinks that he lost that award to a guy that really did not deserve to win it over him. When you look at the WAR, and wins above replacement, right, Doc, is so important now. I've tried to teach you that here on Tigers Talk, and I think you've learned something from me about that. And when you look at it, among shortstops in the Hall of Fame, such as Barry Larkin, now a guy, remember, that played at U of M, so we got to love him, right, a little bit, and was part of a World Series championship ball club with the Cincinnati Reds, but That's one. Trammell won once as well. And guess who has more WAR in their respective career? Trammell. 70.4 to 70.2 for Larkin. And Derek Jeter, the much acclaimed. Everybody loves Derek Jeter. Everybody in New York on the East Coast gets off to Derek Jeter, right? And just loves him for what he did in the postseason for all those great Bronx Bombers ball clubs. But his WAR is barely above Trammell's, his career WAR. His career WAR, according to baseballreference.com, is 71.8. So it's barely above Alan Trammell's. And guess what? Alan Trammell never got nearly as much love and praise as Derek Jeter did, and that's where the East Coast bias, I think, kicks in a little bit there, Doc. And it's a reason why Trammell's not in the Hall of Fame. It's a reason why Jack Morris isn't in the Hall of Fame. It's a reason why Lou Whitaker's not even on this modern baseball era ballot, Doc, as he should be. And to answer your question, your first question was about whether or not these guys truly weren't stars, and it was the collection or sum of parts, right, as the Pistons have been talked about, that 04 championship team. I think it's not that. I don't really believe in that because Trammell almost won a Most Valuable Player award, and guess what? Those 04 Pistons, none of those guys almost won an MVP. None of those guys should have ever won an MVP and never were good enough to win an MVP. Trammell was, and that's why Trammell should be in the Hall of Fame and definitely should be enshrined via this modern baseball era ballot.
So all we can control is what the Tigers do as an organization and just say, look, obviously show these guys the proper amount of respect and retire these guys' numbers for Christ's sake and make it happen sooner rather than later. Look, the times now in the next coming years are going to be very thin and lean, so maybe they will actually maybe they'll get their shit in order and figure out that, hey, these guys definitely deserve to have their numbers retired and do it over the next 3 seasons, one each, and allow these guys to actually garner the respect that they deserve, that the fans think that they deserve, and for what they did for this city and for the Tigers organization, I do believe their numbers should be retired, at least to help, boost the notion that these guys are Hall of Famers. You can't nationally say that these guys are Hall of Fame worthy when the organization themselves don't view them as the best in their own organization.
And now, even if you retire their numbers now, is it too late? I mean, does it look bad for the Tigers? It's not going to be the same and mean the same, right, as if they would have done it right after they retired. Trammell after 96, Whitaker after 95. If you would have retired their numbers around that time or like when Comerica Park opened, but now it's 2017, going to be 2018 next year, it's almost too late. Now, you still want to do it, and I think it allows to shine some light on the Tigers that won't be shining on the Tigers in the near future because of the lackluster product that will be on the baseball diamond in the next 2 to 3 years with them losing 90 to 100 games. So the way of appeasing some of the fans, the old Tigers fans, and bringing some of their asses back to the ballpark and in the stands at Comerica Park, well, would be through retiring these guys' numbers in the very near future. Because you might actually get a good attendance number for a game where you retire Trammell's number, where you retire Lou Whitaker's number. And how rightful would it be for the Tigers as a franchise to retire both of their numbers at the same point in time? Think about that. That's what they should do, in my opinion, Doc.
Vito, let's start the movement. There's been a groundswell. I think many people have been trying in many different ways to get the Tigers to recognize how important it is to retire their numbers. I think it's getting bigger and bigger as each podcast show airs, as more and more writers look at it. It's going to happen. They should have done this much sooner.
Because the luster isn't nearly as there as it would have been if they would have retired these guys' numbers right after they finished their Major League Baseball careers and stints, their long stints with the Tigers. Really quick note, very big stat here from Joe Block, Joe_Block on Twitter. The highest WAR, wins above replacement, among modern era players not in the Hall of Fame with stats through 1996. The modern era, by the way, started in 1900. From what many people believe, and according to Baseball Reference and their stat tracking. And so Lou Whitaker, by the way, among those guys with the highest WAR among modern era players not in the Hall of Fame, he's right there, right at the top, number 3. Number 3, behind only Barry Bonds and Pete Rose. So Barry Bonds did roids. That's why he's not in the Hall of Fame, right? Pete Rose gambled on his own ball club when he was managing the Cincinnati Reds. So why isn't Lou Whitaker in the Hall of Fame with the 3rd highest WAR in the modern era of baseball? With these stats accumulated through 1996, a year after Lou Whitaker retired. Why isn't Whitaker at least on the modern baseball era ballot? With that being said, it's a shame, it's a travesty, and you got to start doing something. We all, I think, have started doing something, and hopefully more and more momentum is built for these guys, right? To get these guys finally enshrined into the Hall of Fame. And specifically for me, the guys that I would like to see enshrined in the Hall of Fame are Trammell and Whitaker. I think Trammell has a great shot. I think he's the one player on this 10-player ballot of the modern baseball era ballot that should get in, and the guy for sure that I would vote for, along with with Marvin Miller, this guy who was with the Players Union, I believe was the head of it, and helped get free agency started in Major League Baseball. Played a huge, influential role in getting free agency started. So Marvin Miller and Trammell from this 10-player, 10-man ballot for the modern baseball era ballot. Those two names, in my opinion, should be enshrined via this ballot. And Morris, you can make a great case for Jack Morris as well, Doc.
Okay, let's take our first time out. We'll come back. We'll have the debate regarding Justin Verlander and whether or not he should have stayed in Houston after the Astros did win the World Series, and to discuss his Game 6 performance, and finally how much Detroit should have supported him and whether or not the level of support was fair or foul.
Sounds good, and we'll be right back after this quick commercial break on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And Doc, the Detroit Sports Commission is one of our fine sponsors and has been now for a while. And guess what? Since '01, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, Doc, follow the DSC on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and make sure to check out their fine website at DetroitSports.org. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, I'm your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, along to my usual sidekick and partner in crime, the Doc from Doc and Jock. And Doc, you wanted to talk a little bit about JV. What do you have to say here?
Well, on the podcast, if you definitely listen every single week on the Tigers Talk podcast, I made a bold prediction that I thought that the Astros would win the World Series in 5 games, and they had the opportunity. It was really a quality World Series. Many raved about it, the drama, the late inning heroics, the sheer number of home runs. But I definitely want to focus in on Game 6. I mean, after the Astros were able to take Game 5, a quality game, it's now on Justin Verlander, and it's up to him, the guy that they brought in, to go on the road in a tough situation, the guy that they're paying a boatload of money. As opposed to what the salary structure is for Houston, Justin Verlander's making a ton, a statistically significant amount, much more than a lot of the players on the Astros. So it comes down to Game 6, and it's up to him to kind of close it out. And while you can't really blame Justin Verlander because he only gave up 2 or 3 runs in that appearance, and the Astros didn't give him a whole heck of a lot of run support in that game, he did pitch well, obviously, until the 6th inning, and then that's when the Dodgers were able to tattoo him a little bit and knock him out of the ballgame. But I felt like Justin Verlander would have been much better for his own personal legacy to cement the World Series himself. Now, they go on to Game 7, they recover. The Astros, right away, they pounce on Yu Darvish. Some will argue that Yu Darvish was tipping his pitches, but it was clear the Astros came to play in Game 7, and the Dodgers, they just were blown away by the moment. The Astros win the World Series. Justin Verlander gets his World Series ring, and it really does make, for a quality movie to write that. It took him basically up to the final seconds to make the decision to, accept the opportunity to be traded to the Houston Astros. He gets his ring. He kind of piggybacks a little bit on that championship team, but he was a decent part of it up till the World Series. And it's so fascinating to look at what he's able to do in the postseason versus what he does actually in the World Series. And I do believe at this point in time, he has yet to earn a World Series victory in his career. And you look at the whole scenario and how it played out, I wish that he would have won it himself Game 6. I wasn't personally rooting for the guy. I was of the stance, and a lot of people debated with me regarding how much support should Detroit fans give to Justin Verlander. There was this outpouring of love and support and tweets and messages regarding Justin Verlander, and I get it. For me, it just wasn't to that degree. I didn't want the man to fail. I kind of wanted him to win the World Series because he's put his time in. He's done enough to earn his ring. I mean, you went there to Houston and didn't lose a game up until the World Series. He didn't lose a game for Houston, and his stuff was amazing. But was I going all apeshit for Justin Verlander? No, I wasn't tweeting at him. I wasn't, going rah, 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 go JV. putting on any jerseys or nothing like that. I look at it like I view any relationship with a former ex-player that plays in Detroit. Once you stop wearing the Detroit uniform, then my emotional attachment to you goes away. Wish you the best. Don't wish any ill will or harm towards you. But when you play a Detroit team, so when the Astros come to Detroit in September of next year, I kind of hope the Tigers knock them around a little bit. But I do not prescribe to the notion that you have to show this outpouring of love for Justin Verlander. He had a chance to give us those moments. He had a chance to provide us with that sense of pride and joy and love by winning a World Series in Detroit. Now he goes to Houston and wins it, and I just go, man, it was another moment where you look at Detroit sports and you say, how many more times do we got to get kicked in the nuts? JV winning it with the Astros, kind of indicative of the shitty quality right now of Detroit sports. Really, it's like the stamp of 2017 that the guy you traded away goes to another team, wins himself a championship ring, a World Series ring. And it's so crazy in terms of how he planned his life. He planned his wedding basically a day after the official World Series ended. So he knew the Tigers likely were not going to make it because he planned it when he was still a member of the Detroit Tigers. And my final take on it will be, dude, you're rich. You're filthy rich. And you're rich, and your lady is filthy rich. And I know there's plans and logistics of all your guests and things like that, but to postpone it maybe 4 hours probably would not be a big deal. You could have chartered a private jet. You could have went for at least maybe the first 5 minutes, get on the first float, wave to all the people, hold up the trophy, get your photo op, and then just scurry along to your car. You scurry along, get out of the parade a little early, get on your private jet. It's just basically maybe 4 extra hours out of your day basically to be part of a parade. And I feel like it was a major violation for him not to be in that parade.
Well, it's not a violation against anything. There's no team policy that you have to show up for your World Series parade. Now, as a fan, if I was a fan of the Astros and that guy did all that he did in the playoffs, I would want him there because he did a lot of great stuff for the Astros down the stretch, too, after they got him in that trade at the waiver trade deadline on August 31 of this year. But also, it's his right because he did so well to do what he wants, to get married in Italy right after the World Series ends. It's his life. He can live it the way that he wants, Doc. Sorry, man. Some
breaking news here coming across the wire. As we're recording this, I think a plane that Roy Halladay was on crashed. And there's going to be some updates regarding if there's any survivors. But there may be a potential tragedy here with a former ex-Major League Baseball player. It's kind of shocking here to kind of read this as we're chit-chatting here about Justin Verlander.
That would be sad to hear, definitely. Yeah. Moving from a bright moment in Justin Verlander winning a World Series for the first time and getting married to Kate Upton. Who wouldn't want to get married to Kate Upton? What a lucky man, a lucky bastard, you could say, is Justin Verlander. Right? A lot of men are envious, too.
Right now, it's unclear if Roy Halladay was on the plane.
For sure. It's speculative. I know Tony Paul tweeted out something, and you're probably reading that, right, Doc?
Mm-hmm.
So, moving back to JV, more power to him. Getting married to Kate Upton.
Did you cry?
Gotta be envious of him for that. I'm not a man that was crying, though, after he won. I did not cry, actually. Did not do it. I know you still think I would have because I just love JV so much. But I'm the type of guy, too, that wasn't going to go out and get an Astros uniform with this number on it. I am not going to do that anytime soon either. And is he now a member of the Hall of Fame, Doc? That's a question to debate, and one that I wanted to get into just a tad here on Tigers Talk this week. As when you look at Jay Jaffe, he's a writer for SI.com. He came up with this metric for evaluating players and whether or not they're truly Hall of Famers called JAWS. And when you look at it, it's a stat that can be, a metric, a thing that he came up with that can be found on baseballreference.com too, Doc. And when you look at Justin Verlander's JAWS, it says his career WAR, now which you can just find on Baseball Reference simply. It is 56.6 currently. His 7-year peak WAR is 43.5. And his JAWS then is 50, according to Jay Jaffe, who came up with this JAWS. So his career WAR, according to Jay Jaffe, is below what it should be for a Hall of Famer. What the average career WAR is for a Hall of Fame pitcher. As according to Jaffe, the career WAR that you need to be a Hall of Famer is 73.9. JV's is 56.6. So I kind of did the math earlier. Not that I'm a mathematician here. I'm not going to try to pretend to be either. But he needs at least 3 more high-quality seasons of averaging 5 WAR a season. At least that, if not 4, for sure 4. If he gets 4 of those seasons going forward with the Astros and another ball club, maybe the Tigers to end his career, then he could and should be a Major League Hall of Famer. Really should be. And when you look at then some other guys, not to make this about Lou Whitaker again, but his jaws, that thing that Jay Jaffe came up with once again, it puts him in the Hall of Fame as his career WAR is higher than what it should be, according to Jay Jaffe, for second basemen who are in the Hall of Fame, guys that are Hall of Fame caliber second basemen. So it tells you even more why Lou Whitaker should be in the Hall of Fame and why a guy like Justin Verlander getting that World Series ring finally doesn't truly cement his Hall of Fame legacy.
But his career's not over.
And it's not. He needs 3 or 4 more years of producing like he has since 06, averaging 4.8 WAR according to Baseball Reference. If he does that the next 3 to 4 years, he's a Hall of Famer then. But he's got to do that, Doc.
So what do you think about the fans in Detroit still showing love for JV even though he's not wearing a Houston uniform?
Well, they can. It's their right. Like JV's right is to go party after his wedding, to get married in Italy and to have a good old time with Kate Upton there. He can do what he wants, even right after the World Series ends. And I think Tigers fans have the right to cheer on JV because of what he did in the Tigers at Uni.
Is his World Series cheapened by the fact that he didn't cement the victory Game 6? Is it cheapened that he got his ring based upon the fact that he's sitting on his ass watching a Game 7?
I'll tell you this much. I wanted to see him pitch in Game 7 because he didn't get that W in Game 6 for the Astros to clinch the World Series title for the Houston Astros. Their first in franchise history. So it lessens it a little bit, takes a little bit away from the luster for JV getting a World Series title for the first time in his big league career. But you still have to commend the guy for pitching as great as he did throughout the postseason. In those first 2 rounds, too, in the ALDS, in the ALCS, he shut down the opposition.
Give the man some run support. My goodness.
Yep.
Some people, though, are really angry at JV, wondering why he couldn't perform to that degree in the World Series for the Detroit Tigers. Now you go to another team. Another team gets the benefit of Justin Verlander's services. And you know the part that stings a little bit more as a fan? The Tigers are still paying part of that salary. So a little bit of your money that you pay to go and watch a Tigers game, just a little bit of that money is being filtered from the Tigers to the Houston Astros to pay some of that salary. So a little bit this year and a little bit next year, I believe, $16 million of the remaining money that he was owed. So when you go buy a ticket to watch your Detroit Tigers lose 100 games, a little bit of your money is going to Justin Verlander to celebrate his own life, not with the Detroit Tigers.
You're benefiting Justin Verlander and the Houston Astros, and I don't think a lot of Tigers fans would be pleased to hear that, but that is true. $8 million a season until his contract runs out in 2019. And maybe he'll reunite with the Tigers after 2019 to end his Major League career. Now, really quick, like you said, Tigers fans have a reason to be disappointed in his past World Series experiences in a Detroit Tigers uniform, as in 2012, he got bombed. Remember that with the Giants? They didn't win a game in that series. He has, an ERA above 11, 0-1, got bombed by Pablo Sandoval and the Giants.
No.
Remember how ugly that was?
That was also,
never good.
That was a series too where was that the series where they had the break offensively and they were rolling in the postseason and they had that week off in between the start of their series.
That was 06 where he wasn't good. He was still a rookie though, so we have to give him the benefit of the doubt in that postseason and in that World Series.
That was the World Series where the offense went super cold.
But it did against the Giants kind of too. Remember Miguel Cabrera really didn't hit in 2012. All these big sluggers did not really hit in that series.
I remember 06 being the one that was really marked by the poor fielding and the pitchers
errors too by the pitchers.
The pitchers couldn't throw the ball,
included.
So it's just one of those things with the Tigers in the World Series. 2 wasted opportunities. And it's a good debate to have whether you should really revere those athletes that played in Detroit that go on and move on to other teams. But it was well debated. A lot of people went back and forth. Some people showed him love. Some people said, look, let's just not, let's not invest anymore in JV. He's not with another team. And hey, wherever you decide to stand, it's all good.
I would just say you can't burn his jersey all of a sudden now because he moved on. He got traded. He didn't choose to sign with the Astros, got traded to the Astros. And you got to give him props for getting it done with the Astros. More power to him. We would have been so proud if he would have done it with the Tigers. I know he didn't do it with the Tigers, but it doesn't give people reason to burn his Tigers jersey all of a sudden. Like, I have a Tigers jersey with JV's number on it. I'm not going to just go burn his jersey all of a sudden. And I hate people that do that just turn their back on somebody after they move on, get traded, and whatever means it may be that they move on to another organization. I don't think that makes it the right time to burn that person's jersey, Doc.
Vito, agree with you 100%. Great podcast. Enjoyed the conversation. History will probably be very kind to JV because of the fact that dude has a quality arm. I do think he's going to bring a lot more to the table, and there's a chance that this Houston team can live up to the hype and maybe even get back there sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Houston, I think, has a really good shot to repeat really quick wanted to bring up regarding JV's wedding, too. Guess who was there? Did you see who was there in the back of the
He got himself
picture?
in the picture, Zimmerman.
Jordan Zimmerman was there.
You would expect a couple Tigers to support him. Obviously, it's not surprising at all. Very lovely photos. You can go check them out on TMZ. Justin Verlander has been posing pictures as well. All right, but we have to ask before we get out of here. Over under 5 years of that marriage.
Wow.
Under.
Harsh to say, but I'm going to say under 2. It's hard not to agree that it's going to be under.
She's going to cheat on him.
So that's Big Vito's over under. What are the chances? Over or under 50% that they stay married?
Under.
Under. I think that's fair to say. It's harsh to say. I don't know if it's fair, but it's kind of fair because you see all these celebrity marriages.
Yep.
They don't last. They last a year, 6 months. What did Kim K and what's his name last? Humphreys. They didn't last more than 6 months, more than a couple of weeks, I think. So
from the Detroit Sports Podcast, we wish them all the best, but right now we have it at under that this marriage is going to last. So we'll see.
Sorry about that, JV. We don't trust in your marriage lasting. But we're going to move on now and end this week's edition of Tigers Talk. With that, Doc, I am signing off for this week's episode. It's been a pleasure as usual, and thanks to all of you for tuning in as usual, too. And tune into next week's episode as well. Always, always, always being released on Wednesdays.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, thank you very much for finding it. You can also listen to our daily content each and every day via our Detroit Sports Podcast platform. Visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com.